okay to go on ahead. So if you want to go ahead there now, Ciara, commence the
Okay,
meeting.
thank you, Chair, and welcome everyone. It's quite a big gathering for this afternoon, but an important one. So we'll start just with the notice of the meeting. Members, you are hereby summoned to attend the virtual special meeting of the Health and Community Committee on Wednesday, the 31st of March, 2021. And I'll take the roll call. So Alderman Devaney.
Here.
Alderman Guy.
Here.
Alderman Wark.
Here.
Councillor Barr.
Here.
Councillor Burke. Councillor Duffy.
Shaw.
Councillor Edwards. Councillor Farrell.
Here.
Councillor Ferguson.
Here, Karen.
Councillor Harkin.
Here.
Councillor Logue.
Sure.
Thanks, Patricia. Councillor McGee.
Shaw, Karen.
Councillor Mooney.
Here, Karen.
And Councillor Riley.
Apologies for Councillor Riley. He should be
Okay.
coming shortly, but he just has to convey that to you. Thank you.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, Karen, thank you. And I will read out the statement for remote meetings. I would like to remind everyone who is in remote attendance that this meeting will be broadcast live via the Council's YouTube channel and will be available for viewing by the public and media. The broadcast will also be available for repeated viewing at a later date. This broadcast may be terminated or suspended in accordance with Council protocol. Members and approved speakers are reminded to only have their mics and cameras on while speaking at the meeting and use the chat facility to highlight a request to speak. By participating in this meeting, you're consenting to being filmed and to the use and storage of those images for broadcasting or training purposes and for the purpose of keeping historical records and making those records available to the public. A copy of the Council privacy notice may be found on the Council website at www.derrystrabane.com. Folks, declaration of members' interests. If everyone would like to declare now. Go ahead there, Rachel.
Chair, I'm
Sorry,
a member of
Councillor
CWU.
Ferguson.
You're fine, don't worry. Just declare I'm a member of CWU. Thank you.
Is there anyone else, or Councillor Duffy, member of Unison? I'll let you put them in the chat box there because we've quite a few speakers to get through. So if everyone just puts them on. Councillor Harkin? Unison, okay. So if you just all put them on there, we can move on with the meeting. I have no chairperson's business other than to say if members are okay and agree that items 18, 19 and 20 on the agenda and the supplement agenda are brought up the agenda to allow all trade union representatives to speak in sequence as stated in the PowerPoint presentation provided. Due to the statutory agenda notification to members, a full list of trade union representatives were not available at the time of publishing. This is why we're doing this at the minute too. So I'll get on with all the speakers and I'll welcome you all here today. You are all very welcome. This is part of a motion that was brought forward to Council to hear the voice of all trade unions in the area. And you're all very welcome here today. After that, the call for the unions in student areas was asked to be included, which we have. So it's quite a lengthy list of speakers here today. So I would like to go on and welcome Niall McCarroll to the Health and Communities Committee. And Niall, I'd just like to start off by apologising on behalf of Council and making an error on your surname when they were putting out the papers to everyone. So I'll let you go ahead, and I'll just say that due to the amount of speakers each, we've agreed that each speaker will be permitted up to 3 minutes to speak to the members. After that, we'll take the student members, and then we will hold an question and answer session then with all members of the trade unions. So now, if you would take the stand there and take it away there. Thank you.
Thanks, Chair, committee members. I just want to begin by thanking all the council staff who work behind the scenes to make this event possible. And I hope that council employee that got my name wrong will not be called into a disciplinary hearing. But if you want me to give evidence in support of her or he, I will. So yeah, look, obviously there's a lot of effort put in behind this, coming from the council chamber right through to this committee. So we're very appreciative, as you say, Chair. On behalf of the 20,000 affiliated trade union members through the various unions, we again show our gratitude to those who made this meeting possible. And I suppose just in terms of those 20,000 people who we are speaking on behalf of today in different forms, the majority of our affiliates are now referred to as essential frontline workers, but they're also low paid and referred to as being unskilled. And how can any worker that's seen as essential to society also be seen as unskilled? But this is what happens within capitalist societies. A deliberate and constant message that, you know, be glad that you have a job, and what the business community, what the various local chambers of commerce, what they're all saying in their message is the correct message, and you listen to us and we know what's best. And we will tell you what you're worth as our worth. This is why this type of meeting is important, Chair, and it certainly gives a voice to undervalued frontline workers, and that's what this should be about, and we are glad this is happening. But these meetings need to be more than just aspirational, Chair. Council needs to be seen as an advocate for working people and local workers, and the growing disconnect between politics and working class communities needs to be called out, and every effort must be channeled into creating a voice for working class people, and that today again provides that opportunity and a voice for working people to be heard. And that's what today's panel
Niall, could I just come in there? Niall?
Yeah.
Sorry, am I the only one that Niall's breaking up on?
It's breaking up me as well.
No, he's breaking up
Two.
as well.
Right.
Right.
Okay. Now, if you would just go back a bit and just, if you could maybe turn off your video, because maybe you might come in better then. You seem to be breaking up a bit.
Okay. Can you hear me better now? Is that a better signal?
Fine for me.
Yeah. Okay. I'm not quite sure where I got to, but you know, obviously this meeting is about the speakers on the panel, so I'm quite happy to hand over to the speakers chair to say whatever they want to say about their specific sectors. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Niall, for that there. First on the list is Kieran Smith of Union of Shop, Distributive and Allied Workers for Retail Sector. So go ahead there, Kieran.
Thank you, Chair. Thanks, Council, for giving us the time to speak today. I would just like to say a few words around shop workers and the issues they've had over the last year. I think everybody's seen that shop workers are now seen as key workers. I mean, we needed to keep the food on the people's tables while everyone else was told to stay at home. So what Ulster is doing is Ulster would like the council to support our campaign that we've launched, and that's a new deal for workers. And what that is quite basically a list of demands that we would like to see low-paid workers get within the retail sector. And literally what they are is literally a minimum wage of £10. We all know that low-paid workers are seen now in the real light, and a minimum of £10 an hour isn't a hard ask. We also ask for a minimum contract of 16 hours a week. We need to get back to normal hours contracts, no more short hours and no more flexible working, and that's what we're asking in this campaign of ours. And that's a ban on 0 hour contracts altogether. We also want better sick pay for our members. And I think COVID highlighted that even more, guys. I mean, if you just look around, there's a lot of people who ignored staying at home when they had symptoms of COVID because they were afraid that they wouldn't get paid at all. It was all good and well, the British government saying that they'll wait for the 3 days waiting on statutory sick pay, but that wasn't enough. People can't live on £78 a week, and that's where we're coming from. We also want protection at work. I mean, if anybody's not shocked, there was a 300% increase in violence against shop workers since the pandemic hit, from people getting potatoes thrown at them to being spat at, for customers getting irate because they ask a member of staff to take money out of their mouth that they're holding on, their notes in their mouth in the middle of a pandemic, and the customer and the shop worker refuses to take the money off them because they've had slobbering all over it and their spittle. Protection at work as well. I think it's very important that we get protection at work. This coronavirus is showing how much we need protection at work. We need a proper social security system as well, guys. We need a good social security system. And one of the other ones we are asking for is job security. No more 0 hour contracts with when are you coming in and do we need you in tomorrow? If you even come in, sometimes go home, we don't need you. And one of our other aims in this new deal for workers is fair treatment and equality for all our workers, guys. I mean, our members need a voice at work. And in this day and age, in 2021, to still say that employers can refuse recognition is a nonsense. We need to be able to.
Kieran, could you just wrap it up there now, please?
Yes, we need to be able to have recognition in the workplaces, and we need a voice at work. And I ask the council please to support our campaign, a new deal for workers. Thank you.
Thank you, Kieran, for that presentation. Thank you. Next, I have, and I'm just going to ask Lorraine here. Lorraine, I have taken the list off the way the slides fell from the presentation rather than how they are on the agenda. So I have next.
That's correct, Chairman.
Yeah, Andrew Doherty, Royal College of Nursing. Is that right? Yes, that's all right. We're okay. So, Andrew, if you'd like to go ahead there.
All right, hello. Thank you to Council Chair and Committee members for the opportunity to speak. So I'm Andrew Doherty. I'm a steward and safety rep at the Royal College of Nursing, based primarily in the Western Trust, and I'm also a member of the RCN Northern Ireland Board. And as you know, the RCN is the largest professional association and trade union for nurses, nursing assistants and nursing students. So I've been a nurse myself for 11 years, and I've always worked in Nelson Galvin Hospital in the cardiology department, and during COVID was patient facing for a lot of that, and then stepped out into some trade union work as well. So the pandemic has placed a spotlight on the vital role that nursing staff play in protecting health and well-being of the community every day of every year. And whilst members of the public were advised to stay at home to protect themselves, nurses were asked to place themselves at the front line against the virus. And where social distancing was enforced and encouraged, nurses continued to provide intimate personal nursing care to the sickest patients, often at the end of life. and the toll on nurses and nursing assistants has been immeasurable. Staff have been redeployed to unfamiliar areas with the huge responsibility of a patient's life on their shoulders, and that weighs heavy for every professional nurse. And the emotional and physical harm done has been immeasurable. I have had staff come to me crying, upset, distraught at the constant high pressures of wearing claustrophobic, hot and heavy personal protective equipment for hours on end. We've had staff unable to get breaks. We've had staff who faint from dehydration, and staff who suffered pressure damage around their face from the masks that they're forced to wear. And some of the harrowing stories that you all have heard of, the Grey Steel couple who unfortunately lost their lives. The nurse who provided care to that couple is off at the minute. She's receiving psychological support for the trauma that she suffered during that particular event. She cared for the gentleman through the end of his life. She knew his wife was in the hospital, and she facilitated the transfer of his wife to the bedside of her husband so they could share the last few minutes of their lives together, and they died within 6 minutes apart. And the emotional stress on that nurse has been overwhelming to the point where it's had a negative impact on her health. I have another nurse member who is a single mum to 2 children with cerebral palsy. She's their main carer, and she's also a frontline nurse on a COVID ward. And her sole worry for the past year has been A, taking the virus home to her children who are already clinically extremely vulnerable, and B, herself getting unwell and not being able to look after her 2 children. So the effect has been paramount. And you may have seen the Royal College of Nursing has launched a Fair Pay for Nursing campaign, and that aims to secure a consolidated 12.5% pay claim for all nursing staff covered under Agenda for Change terms and conditions. But the sentiment extends to those in the independent and private sectors. And the rationale, if you remember back to last January, February time, RCN members, along with our other health union colleagues, were on strike in Northern Ireland, and we were on strike because there was a lack of nursing. There was a massive number of nursing vacancies and a shortage of nursing staff across the board, and the pay parity was not there with the rest of the UK. So
if I could just ask you to wrap it up here.
Thank you, Chair. So the RCN are asking for 12.5%, and we hope that would recognise the full depth and complexity of the skills and the expertise of a safety critical profession, and recognise that this will also retain and recruit much needed nursing staff. And I'd ask Council just to support the RCN's 12.5% pay claim. Thank you very much for your time.
Thank you, Andrew, for that there. Thank you very much. And next up, we have Saoirse Fanning of Unison Community Solidarity.
Thank you, Chair and committee members. My name is Saoirse Fanning. I am Unison Community Volunteer Branch Secretary, speaking in a personal capacity. COVID-19 has significantly impacted the community and volunteer sector where our members work. They have worked tirelessly to support the emergency response to COVID-19 and provide care and support to some of the most vulnerable people in society within the supported accommodation, care facilities, homeless projects, the women's sector and community group. As well as working in the front line ourselves, we as trade unionists have been fighting for our members to get full pay when off sick with COVID-19 or having to isolate due to close contact tracing. Some employers are only paying statutory sick pay, even though money was available from DFC to pay staff in full, even though those employers that pay statutory sick pay to frontline staff are paying enhanced terms and conditions to office staff and senior management. The lack of full pay while off work due to COVID-19 has left some workers with no option but to use food banks to survive. These are the same workers that support the most vulnerable within this city and district. Organisations where we have recognition agreements in place have been a lot better, and we have negotiated full pay for COVID-19 absences on behalf of our members. Another significant issue affecting pregnant female members during COVID-19 is that some employers are choosing to ignore the medical guidelines and recommendations regarding pregnant women not continuing to do face-to-face work after 28 weeks gestation. The advice and recommendations are that pregnant women should be offered alternative work or suspended in full pay on health and safety grounds. We have had to contact numerous employers regarding this and lodge grievances on behalf of our members to ensure their safety as the pregnancy progresses. Some employers were telling members to use annual leave or go on to statutory sick pay, leading to our members being financially impacted due to a lack of duty of care from their employer. Another blow to the community and volunteer sector workers was their exclusion from the Department of Health's COVID-19 recognition payment scheme. Most of our members are health and social care workers registered with the Northern Ireland Health and Social Care Council. We are doing the same job as our colleagues employed by the Department of Health, except the services we work on have been privatised, outsourced, and the frontline staff are in poverty pay and poor terms and conditions. The privatisation and outsourcing of public services, such as the care for people with learning disabilities, has resulted in unregulated manipulation of public money. There is no scrutiny or regulations around salary scales. No one in the relevant government departments is challenging how senior managers can earn six-figure salaries and frontline essential workers earn minimum wage. Unison Community and Voluntary Branch has launched a campaign for a £500 COVID recognition payment for workers in the community and voluntary sector. One response I received from one MLA was, "However, I am sure you will appreciate that with limited funding available, there is a unique case to be made for healthcare workers on the front line of the fight against COVID-19. The complete lack of knowledge of the community and voluntary sector and the number of frontline health and social care workers within that sector, even from elected representatives, disappointing but not surprising. This has had a significant number of outbreaks of COVID-19 in schemes and projects across the community and voluntary sector, with staff providing full care and support for tenants and residents who are COVID-19 positive, leading to staff being exposed and testing positive. The work we do in the community and voluntary sector is invaluable. We as workers know this, but when are the relevant departments and employers going to recognise this and ensure we are treated fairly and paid an honest day's pay for an honest day's work? Thank you.
Thank you, Chairship. Thank you very much. Next on the list, we have Gareth Moore from AEGIS Union. Is there a pronunciation to that? Is it Aegis or is it just?
yeah, Chair. It's thank you. As the Divisional Secretary for Aegis, the union, we operate in financial services and also a lot of workers within call centre environments. Due to operating within the financial sector, our members are deemed essential workers, many in branches and large call centre environments. As a pandemic hit, we engaged with their employers and requested they close sites so colleagues work from home if possible. Our members work in a heavily regulated sector, and like many who operate in call centre environments, they're doing so in heavily monitored and scrutinised working environments. Every minute is monitored, be reported on, or be challenged for minimal deviations from targets or expectations. And unfortunately, where low wages seems to be an industry standard, really broken across the city or region. For our part within Derry, Aegis has delivered £240,000 of investment through its Union Learn project. This is done in collaboration with our recognised employers. These funds deliver qualifications to upskill and reskill workers and members of the local community. This has brought a huge amount of value to our members, to our communities, and also to employers who gain a more engaged, knowledgeable, and proficient workforce. Generally speaking, the financial industry has undergone substantial change in recent years, and this has been ramped up due to COVID to focus more on automation and digitalisation. The recent announcement of closures of branches across the island is worrying for all, but the fact of the matter is the industry is focused on maximising profits, not maintaining community services. Across the employment force, 1 in 4 workers in Northern Ireland earn below the living wage, and workers in Derry and Strabane earn on average 6% less than their counterparts across the north. The employment market here is subdued, and the market rate for labour has been historically low and remains stubbornly so. But we can't just point to COVID for our difficulties. We must remember prior to the pandemic, we were seeing record levels of employment being matched with record levels of food bank use. It was never so clear that work just didn't pay. There's been talk from all walks of life about not going back to the way things were prior to COVID, but there's been little action to change it. To address the fact that people sell the majority of their life in return for a wage that doesn't meet their basic comforts of life, the ability to buy a home, where too many find the cost of buying unattainable and therefore remain on the rental market, often paying more for housing as a consequence. As shockingly, low wage also means a higher cost of living. We recognise the consistent messages coming from this council of late in support of workers. I commend these actions and I encourage you to be brave, bold and creative moving forward. We could talk all day about the regional inequalities we faced in this area, but from a practical point of view, I would ask this council to consider create a campaign for fair pay across Derry and Strabane that it looks at practical ways to promote, support, and encourage employers, particularly large employers, to commit to paying real wages for staff as a minimum. We would obviously call on all workers within Derry to join a trade union, and I would strongly encourage call centre workers who are facing long hours, intensive monitoring, and low wages to join a union and get actively involved in your union. I remind particularly call centre workers that they're the creators of the wealth within their business.
Gareth,
It is their knowledge and skills that the business cycles their and without those workers, everything stops. So I'll conclude simply, work must pay. And we should not have to sell our lives away just for a better standard of living. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Gareth. Thank you for the presentation there. And we'll move on now to Caroline Mcdermott, Unison Education Branch.
Thank you, Chair and Committee, for the invitation to attend today's Council meeting. I hope that this will be the first of many invitations that we, as trade unionists, activists, will receive. My name is Caroline Mcdermott, and I am a member of Derry Trade Union Council, representing Unison Derry Education Branch, where I sit as Joint Branch Secretary. Today I am speaking on a personal capacity. I am a classroom assistant in a local secondary school here in Derry, where I have been employed since September 2005. The COVID-19 pandemic has had and continues to have a huge impact on everyone working within the educational sector, from teachers, classroom assistants, bus drivers, cleaners, canteen staff, and many other members of support staff, which schools could not operate without. Contrary to what many people think, schools did not close during the lockdown. They remained open for children of key worker children and other vulnerable kids, and operated remotely for those kids who remained at home. This allowed other key workers, such as retail workers, nurses, doctors, auxiliary staff, etc., to attend the workplace for essential work. Staff literally had to adapt to a whole new way of working within a very short time frame. For example, remote learning was introduced, and staff and kids alike had absolutely no experience with this. We had to learn as we went along. Of course, there have not been any allowances paid to staff for this, unlike many others who also were moved to work from home and received huge and significant office cost allowances. Most support staff employed in the education sector are low-paid workers, already struggling to put food on the table for their families. The additional costs encountered as a direct result of remote learning placed these workers into tougher financial hardship. For those members of support staff who remained in the workplace, they had to battle for basic PPE, etc. Social distancing has been removed and relaxed in schools where apparently the virus does not spread. This has caused educational workers to feel undervalued and expendable. Classroom assistants in special schools in particular face many challenges, and calls for them to receive priority vaccinations were unsuccessful. These staff are providing personal care to children, and this must be recognised. I have had to deal with an unprecedented amount of calls from members who are feeling very vulnerable in their place of work. This is totally unacceptable. There is absolutely no doubt that the health, safety and welfare of school staff has been compromised since the beginning of this pandemic. Unions have had to publicly challenge the Education Authority and the Department of Education regarding inadequate guidance, poor consultation and a failure to put in place measures to protect the health and safety of school staff. On one occasion, the Department of Education gave unions less than 24 hours to respond to draft guidance before its publication. This is totally unacceptable and showed a complete disregard for their legal duties to consult. The crucial role that we as support staff play has become much more obvious as a result of this pandemic, when many of us as key workers attended the workplace to provide an essential service when others were being asked to remain at home. I ask that the Council supports our call for all school staff to be given priority in the vaccine programme, and also the Council supports our call for a fair wage which reflects the crucial role support staff play in the education of our children. Thank you.
Thank you, Caroline, for that presentation. And we'll move on to Rory O'Sander, NUPSA Civil Service. I hope, Rory, I've got your pronunciation right there.
You're 100% right, sir.
Thank you.
Thank you, Chair, for the opportunity today. My name is Rory O'Sander, and I'm an Ulster representative in the Department for Communities. I mainly cover the northern region, which includes both Derry and Strabane. I'd like to touch on a couple of main issues affecting civil servants over the last year since the restrictions have been in place due to COVID. The majority of civil servants required to physically attend offices during COVID in the council area work for DFC and administering of benefits from Boyle, Lisnagalvin, Lisahally, Pension Service and Carlisle Road and Strabane as well. But unlike civil servants in other departments, the opportunity to work from home was not readily available to the benefit processing staff due to the fact that we use a different computer system and it was obviously never designed to work from home for security reasons and things like that. So as we don't actually own the system, we're dependent on the Department for Work and Pensions and GB to provide IT solutions to enable members to work remotely. But we're now past the first anniversary of our offices being closed due to COVID, and there's still sizable amounts of staff unable to avail of homework and due to the fact they don't have access to IT. This will hopefully be rectified over the next number of weeks, but the fact remains that they've been waiting over a year. And the fact that the Permanent Secretary for DFC also designated all 8,500 staff as essential or key workers, irrespective of the work they were carrying out, did prove problematic. We did work closely with civil management in order to carry out risk assessments for the office and reduce mitigations such as reduced capacity, rotas, staggered start and finish times, restrictions in moving around offices, increased cleaning regimes in place. But in tandem with the increased cleaning regimes, the NICS awarded a new cleaning contract. So at the same time as we were looking for increased cleaning, the contractor who was successful was looking to reduce cleaning staff and hours as part of their contract. So this is continuing to prove difficult. Obviously, throughout the pandemic, the members working in the benefit offices seen a massive increase in demand. In particular, there's a massive increase in universal credit applications. There's almost 150,000 received since March 2020. And throughout this time in Northern Ireland, they're the highest clearance and accuracy rates above England, Scotland and Wales. Staff have been rightly praised and congratulated for the level of work and commitment they've shown in the adverse circumstances. Many have not been afforded the opportunity of remote working yet. And I know we'd engaged with the council last year during our pay dispute. Well, the circumstances are now different and that the Assembly is back up and running. It is extremely disappointing to note that while the NICS pay award was due from the 1st of August 2020, we're still sitting here today approaching a new financial year with no formal offer yet. So all the praise and claps and pats on the back don't put food on the table or pay the bills. Something that may or may not be on the horizon for Northern Ireland is a public sector pay cap, which the Tories are introducing for all workers, public sector workers apart from the NHS. This is nothing more than a kick in the teeth for people that have played a vital role in delivering services to the public during the pandemic. It's also a cynical ploy to divide workers. I would ask that the council do everything in its power to ensure that this is not introduced in Northern Ireland, and if it is, they actively oppose it. Workers cannot be forced to pay the price for COVID while others have been profiteering from shady contracts for PPE and the like. The other thing in DFC as well, you'd probably be aware.
I asked you to bring it to a close there.
No bother. Councillors, we're approaching a cliff edge. Furlough due to end, and when the restrictions are eased, there will be many businesses unable to survive. And again, the numbers seeking social security assistance will soar. And if the money and staff are not in place to deliver this, then it's like catastrophic for the whole council area and the whole of Northern Ireland. Thanks for the opportunity for speaking.
Thank you for that there. And we'll move on to Adrian Grant, University College Union.
Thank you, Chair. I'm speaking mainly about higher education workers in the university sector, and also speak briefly about the further education workers, particularly at the Northwest Regional College. So prior to the pandemic, UCU was in dispute with universities across the UK on a number of issues, including pay, workload, casualisation, pension dispute, and also gender and ethnicity equality. That dispute is still active. But when the pandemic actually hit and lockdown occurred, we were actually on the picket line, but we did put in a serious amount of extra effort to ensure that students got the education that they deserved during the pandemic. So our priority as a union this time last year was really to ensure that students could maintain contact with their lecturers, but also to ensure the health and safety of both students and staff, to ensure that there was minimal face-to-face contact in universities. And UCU was successful in doing that, particularly at Ulster University, in comparison to universities across the water, where we saw the results of bringing large numbers of people onto university campuses when the pandemic was at its height. The UCU also managed to ensure that people on fixed-term contracts at Ulster University, in particular, again, were given contract extensions last year, rather than be made redundant and be placed into a non-existent job market, essentially. While that was a victory, we still campaign for the end of fixed-term contracts in the higher education sector, except in very limited circumstances. And we would appreciate Council's support in that endeavour to end the use of casualised work, including early paid contracts and fixed-term contracts in higher education. The issues we face now during the pandemic are mainly in regard to massively increased workloads and a blurring of the lines between work and home life due to remote working and online teaching, etc. We're also looking at opposing the privatisation, the further privatisation of higher education, and the extension of courses to private suppliers. If I could just speak briefly, with the end of my time here, on the expansion of Mcgee. UCU supports the expansion of Mcgee. We support the drive towards 10,000 student number. And we believe that there's an onus on the government to properly fund that target, as well as on Ulster University to get closer to that target as soon as possible. So the university needs to be creative in that, as well as receive greater government support. We welcome the opening of the medical school at Mcgee now this coming September, and the issues around the movement of the life and health sciences courses from Jordanstown to Mcgee, while it sees the expansion of student numbers in Derry, there are also major issues of concern for UCU in terms of the workers, our members who are being moved from Belfast to Derry, particularly disabled workers, people with long commute times and people with caring responsibilities. So we're working with them to try to mitigate the impact of that. Finally, just before I wrap up, Chair, the FE strike, the workers at the UCU members at the further education colleges in Northern Ireland were on strike last week over pay, including workers at the Northwest Regional College. They're in dispute mainly with the Department for the Economy on that, campaigning for greater funding of further education in Northern Ireland, and an increase in pay. It shows you the difference in those pay awards when we look at the difference between other sectors in the education sector. So just to note that. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Adrian, for that there. Charlie Kelly of the EWU Communications Union on behalf of the postal workers, next.
Sorry, Chairman, I put a note in the chat box for you that Charlie is unable to attend. Niall has just informed us.
Sorry, I forgot to note that there. Yes, we have just that concludes the trade union speakers for now. What we're going to do now is we're going to let the students union members speak, and then we will come back with a question and answer session for everyone that's been involved here today. So if members don't mind that, we'll move on now to Ellen
Yes.
Fearon from National Union of Students.
Yeah,
Go ahead
perfect.
there.
I'll jump in. Yeah, thank
Yeah.
you. Yeah, hi everyone, and thanks so much for inviting us. We really appreciate it, and I do think it's massively important that student concerns and interest are listened to at all levels. So we really appreciate the opportunity to speak to us. As the chair said, I'm Ellen Fearon, president of NUSUSI, and just for context, NUSUSI is the National Union of Students here in the north, and our membership is made up of around 200,000 students and apprentices across higher and further education here. And I know that I'm sure a lot of you as councillors will be hearing directly from students and parents alike about how difficult things have been for students lately on the ground, and I'm sure that's been happening all year. We, along with our local students' unions and student campaigners, have been running a campaign for the last 6 months called Students Deserve Better. And that campaign calls for a range of supports from students across higher and further education here in response to the pandemic, and also to tackle the failed system of marketisation of third level education, which has impacted staff and students alike here for years and years on end. And I think really the crux of it is that students have been massively failed here, and we're now a year into this pandemic crisis. We still haven't seen the level of support from government that we need for all of our students. We did obviously have quite a big win last month for students off the back of some of this work, but even it took 11 months for us to get even there. So I'm just going to speak really quickly about some of the issues, and then there are a sort of a range of other student speakers here, so I'll pass over to them and give them the opportunity to talk as well. So I'm sure again you'll have heard about a lot of these issues, and you'll be aware. I know your council has been quite active in supporting the campaigns, and some of your councillors in particular have been fantastic. But yeah, a lot of students are paying absolute thousands in rent for houses that they're not living in this year. They're paying extortionate tuition fees that they should never have to pay any year for their education. Students don't have the same access to benefits or universal credit because of their student status, and more often than not, students in financial difficulty or who've lost their jobs this year because of the pandemic are directed to student hardship funds for financial support, which are simply not fit for purpose. We still have a lack of clarity over A-level and BTEC results for our FE students. And this year we've seen more demand for student mental health services than ever before, and our students just really are experiencing extreme levels of uncertainty, anxiety, and are developing other mental health issues. Still to this day, we have students' unions across HE and FE who are fighting tooth and nail for a no detriment policy or a student safety net policy to be introduced, because the context in which students have had to try to get their degrees, their qualifications, and progress academically this year has been next to impossible. There is a massive mental strain there, I think, particularly when so many students are facing academic difficulties, but also facing intense financial problems, or dealing with the loss of loved ones from COVID, or on a very practical level, a lot of students are just sat in their bedrooms completing their degrees, completely isolated, and often with very poor access to Wi-Fi or mobile network, particularly in some of our most rural areas as well. And across the board, there just very genuinely is a crisis here that is largely being ignored. And the point that we always try to make as a student movement is that students are not simply learners. Students are workers, students are key workers, students are renters, students are parents, students are carers. Every single aspect of this pandemic has impacted our student population in some way, and we're a very unique group in society because of all of those conflicting elements. And basically that's the crux of our campaign, that students deserve better than what we've gotten this year. We deserve a lot better, and we're still not getting it.
Ellen, if I
so
could just wrap up there now.
Yeah, no worries. Well, I would just say quickly, we did get a £40 million package announced a while ago with those £500 payments. So a lot of our work at the minute is really just to try to extend that to further education students, part-time students, and non-EU international students who were excluded from that. We're doing a lot of campaigning work on that at the minute, and I'd appreciate any help from your council in doing that. I will just say as well that the president of Queen's Students' Union, Green, who was meant to speak, couldn't make it. So I'm going to say a few words on her behalf. I don't know if you want me to do that now. Or...
Would you like to speak now and go ahead? You could go when you're speaking now. Just you go ahead and yeah.
Yeah, just really quickly, she passed on a few points that she wanted to make. She unfortunately very last minute couldn't make it. But so Green is the president of Queen's Students' Union. She represents over 26,000 higher education students in Belfast. and she just wanted to make some points around accommodation, to say that in Queen's, students were told that they would get in-person teaching, and then they took out leases, contracts on those houses, and a lack of regulation in the private sector has meant that landlords and halls companies are trapping students into those contracts, and they still can't get out of them almost a year into this crisis. When it comes to mental health, there has been additional funding put into mental health services, but it's only brought them back to the same level of work that they were already at. And they need a radical overhaul of the mental health services because they're stretched so thin. Staff and students alike are really suffering because of that. And then really quickly on fees as well, I know Councillor Sean Harkin has brought a motion and passed a motion at this council about fees, and Green just wanted to make the point that universities, and we're finding this really at the minute, they don't show students where those fees go. We have no idea where students' fees go within those universities and what they're actually used for, and that students cannot truly be partners or co-creators of their education when the balance of power lies with those who continue to put students in debt, and that a fully funded education system is the first step to deal with the brain drain in the Northwest, as well as doing away with the NAS and the cap, but ensuring that that in itself doesn't increase fees and that we need publicly funded education. So I'll leave it there on behalf of Graham, but again, thanks so much to listening to me, and I look forward to your questions after.
Thank you, Ellen, for the presentation. I'd just like to remind the rest of the student speakers, and I know a few of you arrived late, there was just, we'd sort of given around the 3-minute mark for everyone. Now I've given a wee bit extra because I know a few people have pulled out as we've went along. So we'll just move on, all right, but thank you, Ellen. And Bethany Moore of Students Deserve Better campaign, NUS. You're up next, so take it away.
Hi folks, I'd like to say thank you first and foremost for the opportunity to speak. So I'm Bethany Moore and I'm from the Students Deserve Better campaign. So this past year has been tremendously difficult for everyone, but especially for students. 80% of students have struggled financially, 52% of students have noticed a decline in their mental health, and 54% of students would like to receive more help from their university. 50% of my entire time in university has been spent throughout this pandemic. I've spent over £4,000 for accommodation I can't use. I failed to receive any support when I was looking after my family who had COVID, and I just feel quite let down by my institution. After all this, I still consider myself a lucky student. My situation hasn't been as bad as others that I've heard, but I really want to ask, what kind of education system have we got when students like me feel lucky? As horrendous as this pandemic has been, I'm glad that it has shone a spotlight on student issues. Our institutions need to remember that we as students play a vital role in their success. Many of our struggles have existed long before COVID, and now we have a chance to ensure that going forward we truly work to eradicate them. It's not fair that we're increasing fees after the year students have faced. It's not right that we're asking students to live in mouldy, hazardous houses at any stage, and it's completely unjust that we are being failed so much. In October, throughout the UK, one university student a week had died since the beginning of term. Student issues are very real, and if we don't address them, they can be fatal. So I think, just as Ellen had said previously, it's important to stress that students are not a homogeneous group of 18 to 21-year-olds. Students are parents, students are carers, students are workers, we're renters and more, and we really do need support. We need investment, dedication and an overhaul of our university mental health services, our standards of housing and our access to financial and academic aid. We need to extend support like the COVID disruption payment to all students, not just full-time locally based students. So at the end of all this, I would like to ask the council to support the Students Deserve Better campaign and all their actions to secure maintenance grants, academic safety net, rent rebates and upholding of students' basic legal rights, and finally an effective strategy for education now and also for post-COVID recovery. So thank you so much for the opportunity to speak.
Thank you, Bethany. More than welcome here. Colette Cassidy, Ulster University Student Union President. Take the floor there. It's all yours.
Thank you so much, Chair, and thank you so much, everyone, for having myself and my colleague Ryan Harling today. As the Chair has already said, my name is Colette Cassidy, and I'm the President of Ulster University Students' Union. I represent over 25,000 students, and we are based on 4 campuses that are located in Belfast, Coleraine, Jordanstown, and Derry, Londonderry. So obviously we represent a wide range of students that have been suffering throughout this pandemic, and I feel like I'm going to be repeating what both Ellen and Bethany have obviously put forward, but I think it is important to be repeating these issues because they are important issues and need to be heard. Our student population has went through a very difficult year, and obviously their voices need to be heard, and thank you so much again to let us be on this platform. So obviously the pandemic had started back last year, and the learning experience for students completely changed. They had been from on-campus socialising with friends, having on-campus lectures, to being completely online. Ulster University took the approach, as had been said earlier, that it would be fully online learning, with those who needed to be on campus for learning outcomes being on campus. Throughout the pandemic, we all know that that cases went up and restrictions had been put on, which meant that some students who were promised online or on-campus learning were then moved to online, which had an impact because obviously students who were on campus thought they would be on the campus and therefore, sign contracts to make sure that they were living close to campuses. Obviously then moving online, they had no need for the contracts. They couldn't get out of the contracts. Some students that actually signed contracts even before the year started, thinking that they would be on campus. Again, throwing away money that for a house that they weren't even able to use. And obviously wanted to go home and be with their families and the people that they love during this very manic time. Throughout the pandemic, communications haven't been great to students. The communications with our national representatives to student representatives haven't been great either. We are here to represent students and therefore should be involved in the decision making around students, and again, this hasn't happened. It is very limited in the conversations both I, QUB, SU and NUSUSI have with our economy minister, and with higher education, further education being within that department, there should be a right to have us in the room when decisions happen around students. In terms of finance, obviously, as I've outlined, students were in online learning. They obviously weren't able to get to their libraries. They may have not been able to get access to better Wi-Fi. They may not even have a laptop, and again, had to pay out of their own pocket to get some of these resources. As Ellen had said earlier, we obviously have a hardship fund, again filled with a lot of criteria that a lot of students can't meet, and how in this in this pandemic that we're living in, there has to be a criteria based around disruption. Definitely should not be happening. All students have felt disruption and have felt hardship as a part of this pandemic, and everyone should have a right to get that money that is there for students. Obviously, as Ellen and Bethany had both said, the one-off payments for students around the 500 COVID disruption grant, as well as the £2,000 money for all nurses, midwifery, allied health and physiotherapy students was welcomed. But again, students were left out. Not all students received that money, either in both the 500 COVID disruption grant, being our part-time students and international students, as well as FE students. With the £2,000 one-off payment, there were students who were in healthcare, science, as well as biomed that were in clinical placements that also didn't receive that funding too. And again, links back to what I've said about the lack of communication with student representatives by our national leaders. Again, folks, I know that I'm probably
could I just ask you to
Thank you, Chair. And look, at the end of the day, both Ellen and Bethany have outlined the asks and the support that we would love from everybody here. But I think it's just important to note that all the issues I've raised, Ellen has raised, Bethany has raised, and Ryan has raised, has all impacted student mental health. We were in a mental health crisis. This crisis is continuing on and will get worse as the years go on. UUSU have put out a student mental health action plan, and if you haven't seen it already, please do go and look for it. All party leaders were sent them documents, so if you want to kind of get involved, ensure that students' mental health is supported, please do have a look at our action plan and please get involved. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Colette. Thank you for your presentation. And we have one more from the student body, and it's Ryan Harling of Ulster University Student Union Vice President.
Thank you.
So go ahead there.
Thank you. As Vice President of Mcgee, I am a representative for our nursing students who are based here, and a lack of financial support has been a long-standing issue for these students, which has only been exacerbated by COVID. So after engaging with these students, we've received numerous submissions about the impact of COVID, and to quote one submission, there are days when I myself am even struggling with the choice between putting fuel in my car or eating at work. So with just over £5,000 as a living bursary per year, some say they are lucky because that's more than other students get, but that doesn't take into account general access to finance. And I would ask what individual would be lucky to have to choose between fuel and food. So this is as a result of the nursing bursary not being increased since 2012. So I'd ask councillors to support an increase in the nursing bursary to reflect current living costs. And although places are oversubscribed for nursing degrees, when nursing students face such stress during training, as RCN has said, through the stresses of COVID on this sector, they enter the workforce burnt out, resulting in a higher turnover for the industry. And this is not only an issue for people's health and the Department of Health, as they spend significant amounts of money on temporary staffing contracts for nurses, as 1 in 10 places for nursing staff were empty at the end of 2019. So to summarise, this is not a sustainable situation for nursing students, for our NHS, and for the way that it's financed. And Colette has already discussed our gratitude of the £2,000 special recognition payment for this student and for social work students and allied health professionals. And as she said already, unfortunately, this has not been extended to biomedical students who have been working tirelessly in clinical placements with COVID testing. And to put it simply, if it were not for these students, there'd be far more deaths due to a lack of testing and a lack of resources to facilitate such. And again, I just emphasize that these students do need support and they need recognition for their efforts. And it needs to be sustainable, it needs to be long-term. So thank you again for your time, and that's all I have to say.
Okay, thank you, Ryan, for that there. And thank you to all the students for all their presentations, and as well as that, all the trade union members. Now, I'm going to open it up to the floor here, but I know speaking to Councillor Harkin earlier, there were some concerns over what we could and what we could not speak about. We've received this from Philip and the legal team, and I'll just read this out. I would have to advise that any member who has a direct pecuniary interest in the matter being discussed, that they should not participate in the discussion and should ask to be placed in the meeting lobby. This is a legal requirement under Section 28 of the Local Government Act, Northern Ireland, 1972. So that's it, folks. So if we maybe, I'm going to bring in Sean first there. So go ahead, Councillor Harkin.
Thank you, Chair. And first of all, thank you to all the trade union representatives and the student union representatives that took time today to come and lay out your concerns, demands, and the issues that you've been dealing with over the last year and earlier in such a clear and succinct way. I mean, I know there was quite a few presenters, but in 3 minutes, I think you were very, very clear. And I think for for the council, it's very important that we hear your voices directly and that you are able to engage directly with us and have this platform so that nobody can say they didn't know what you were speaking about, demanding and campaigning about. So thank you again for being here. And I hope that this council can be a champion of all the issues that people have raised today. Look, in terms of the trade unions, you know, we've had a number of trade unionists here, and I have to say, when I read yesterday that the First Minister has refused to meet with the Nick Ictu for 4 years, I was absolutely astonished. I can't believe that this has happened, and it shows to me that there is a disrespect at the very heart of our government for workers. I know because I went and reread it last night that our First Minister went and met with Moy Park, or the owners of Moy Park in Brazil, flew all the way there to meet with them in 2013. She's met recently with paramilitary or loyalist paramilitary groups, but refuses to meet with the leader in the north of the Northern Committee of the Congress of Trade Unions. I'm astonished about this, and I think you know, hopefully a meeting will happen very soon now that it's been exposed. You know, we as a council, I think, have been very good standing up for trade unions, standing up for student demands. I think that the students have conducted an absolutely brilliant campaign with Students Deserve Better, and Bethany spoke to it really well there. But all the student unions have been involved in that and done brilliantly, and really held you know, decision makers to account. And we know that you know, a lot of trade unions have been calling for better terms and conditions recently, and have been taking action around pay. To that end, I wanted to ask Niall if he could address a few things. Niall, you know, this year again we've got the Workers' Rights and Social Justice Week coming up, and if you could maybe talk a little bit about plans for that, and what the Derry Trade Union Council is planning. And I also know that there is discussion about some campaigns being initiated by the Trades Council. And then if I could just ask Caroline as well to maybe expand a wee bit on the demand that the Unison Education is making around vaccination, because I've talked to quite a few teachers, obviously, but also, you know, the invisible workers at the schools, the classroom workers, the SEN workers, the cafeteria workers. If you could talk a wee bit more about why that has been such a key demand for Unison Education. Thank you, Chair. Last thing, Chair, if I can just say this, I do have a proposal, and I'll just stick it in there, and hopefully we can chat about it later in the meeting when people have had their opportunity to speak and have a back and forth with councillors, but I'll put it in for now.
No problem, Councillor Harkin. Rachel, sorry, Councillor Ferguson, do you want to come in there next?
Thank you, Chair, and thank you to all the representation today. You know, everybody spoke so passionately, and I want to commend you on that. You have really put across your cases, and it's fantastic to see both the trade unions and the student unions here today. I have a few questions more than anything else, because I know I've come from a retail background. So in particular, I was wondering with Kieran, he was talking about the 0-hour contracts. I'm fully supportive of getting rid of 0-hour contracts, but I know there's an argument out there for part-time workers, and particularly, say, single parents. I wanted to kind of get his perspective on that. Also with Saoirse, we deal with a lot of the community and voluntary sectors here as councillors, and you know, rely on them immensely for a lot of stuff, especially in our rural communities. I was hoping she could kind of elaborate on the 28-week pregnancy protection and how we as a council could possibly help them in that campaign. Ellen, Bethany, Colette, and Ryan, you know, you all spoke fantastically, and I remember attending a Zoom where Bethany, you told us your story, and I think anything that we can do, we fully support you. So and that goes to all the trade unions here today. But it was just those two questions, if you don't mind, Chair. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Councillor Ferguson. And we'll go now to the members of the trade unions. So Councillor Harkin's questions was first out for Niall and Caroline. If you would like to come in there.
I'll just answer first. Is that all right? Or Niall?
Fine, Caroline, if you're there, go ahead. Yeah.
Councillor Harkin, you asked for a bit more information in terms of the call for educational staff to be prioritised for vaccination. You'll recall back whenever the Minister for the Department of Education made the new school day guidance, the decision was made to relax social distancing within schools. Now, in real terms, that means that we don't socially distance at all within the classroom, us who are in bubbles of upward of 120 kids. So that means that we're close contacts on a daily basis with a huge amount of children. And obviously with that comes risk of infection. So that was the basis behind the call for us to be vaccinated. We are working very closely with children. Some of the children need personal one-to-one care in terms of using toilet facilities, lunchtime facilities. And I mean, if you take a look at those who work in the health service that have any contact with patients at all, they have already been offered the vaccine. I don't think sometimes that people realise some of the roles that we do within schools support staff and the actual physical contact that we would have with some of the children. So that would be the main reason why we would be calling for us to be prioritised for vaccination, taking into consideration the fact that we work in an environment, unlike many of the rest of you, where we are not socially distanced, and we, despite the best efforts of the unions in that they try and get social distancing introduced, it has fallen on deaf ears. So that is the reason for the call for priority vaccination, to allow us to feel safer going into work and reduce the risk which we would encounter if we were to contract COVID-19. Thank you.
Thank you, Caroline. Niall, if you want to come in there now.
Can you hear me okay, Chair?
Yeah, fine. Yeah, go ahead.
Not sometimes we're having problems with connections here, haven't we? But yeah, I mean, I'm not sure how much you heard the last time, but just for the record, I just want to say thanks to our colleagues in the student unions for taking part in this event today. It's important that, you know, these events build up a culture of solidarity across various movements. And I suppose one of the things that the students were talking about was about where are their fees going to. And I mean, I think it's common knowledge now that we have two vice chancellors, one in the University of Ulster and one in Queen's, who both earn in around £250,000 each. So I would take a wee look to see where the fees are going, and also in terms of what they were saying around their student rents not being rescinded for this year. I think it's quite clear that the political classes view landlords as more important than students. So I want to thank the student unions for getting involved today and keep up all the good work in terms of you're doing, standing up for students, because they are certainly the future. So in terms of what Councillor Sean Harkin was saying there, I think, you know, this event is one of many that has been arranged recently between council and trade unions, and it's important they continue, and to continue on that culture of solidarity and building up a voice for workers. The Derry Trade Union Council, in conjunction with Derry City and Strabane District Council, last year launched Workers' Rights and Social Justice Week, and this year will be the second year of it. Unfortunately, the first 2 years of this great event have also coincided with a public health emergency and a global pandemic, so we're kind of limited in what we can do around it, but it's certainly something we're looking forward to. And one of the things that we will be doing is launching a local workers survey, which again, as this meeting is doing, is giving local workers a voice to bring forward their concerns to the Trades Council. And no doubt we will then be seeking, as I said earlier on, for the council to also become an advocate for local workers and the issues that they are raising. And one of the themes of workers' rights and social justice this year is certainly going to be around how do we put in place legislation to remove anti-trade union laws that are hampering workers and seem to be, you know, enhancing the profits of the bosses. We need to work towards a delivery on the Bill of Rights, and we also need more worker equality, as that is obviously a theme right across all the speakers who give presentations today, Chair, that there's a growing level of inequality and that needs to be addressed. So, and just on what Sean Harling was saying about the First Minister refusing to meet the trade unions, it's also important to note that the First Ministers in Scotland and Wales have already met with the leaders of the trade union movement. So I concur with what Councillor Harling is saying is concerning, and it seems to be, as is the case with the students, that landlords are put first, and as is the case within the political system, that there's a growing disconnect between politics and working class communities, and we need to do something about that. And I would encourage everybody to join a trade union within Derry City and Strabane District Council and get involved in the student unions, because we need to build up a culture of solidarity, but also resistance to what is, rampant capitalism from you are born right through until, if some people have to use a nursing home, that's also being turned into a money-making exercise. Things are wrong, and we need to do something about that. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Niall. Next, we have Councillor Ferguson. So, Saoirse and Kieran, if you'd like to answer Councillor Ferguson's concerns. Thank you.
Go first, if that's okay. Thank you, Councillor Ferguson, for your question. Regarding female workers who are pregnant, the Royal College of Gynaecology and Obstetricians have put out guidance that any female worker that is over 28 weeks gestation should be offered an alternative workplace, such as working from home and not doing face-to-face work, or suspended on health and safety grounds with full pay. Across the community and voluntary sector, the majority of our members do face-to-face work with clients and service users and vulnerable people within society, and some of the employers have point-blank refused to follow the recommendations coming from health professionals, including their own occupational health doctors, who they are sending their employees to see. We have lodged grievances across the sector to ensure the safety of our members, but it is still now a year under the pandemic coming up as an issue. Only last week I had 2 phone calls from 2 members that their employers were refusing to suspend them on health and safety grounds and refusing to allow them to work from home. But thankfully with our intervention, they were suspended on health and safety grounds, and now will be able to stay safe throughout the rest of their pregnancy, as they're unable to receive the vaccine as until after their baby is born. But people don't realise that this is happening, and it's only with the input of the unions that employers are actually listening and taking heed to what we are saying. But the council, we would appreciate the council's support in making employers aware that there is guidance out there, and that the employers need to respect and have a duty of care for their employees and not put them at any more risk than necessary. Thank you.
Thank you, Saoirse. Kieran, next there.
Yes, thanks, Councillor. Thanks, Councillor Ferguson, for the question. Look, when we talk about a minimum of 16-hour contracts per week, that's for everyone who wants one. So let me give you an example of somebody on a low contract. We've got members on an 8-hour contract who regularly work 30 hours plus every week. But every so often, the employer decides to save a few pounds and puts them back to their 8 hours. How can people live in that? I mean, I know I could not live not knowing from one week to the next if I'm getting 8 hours pay, 30 hours pay, 25 hours pay. So what we're saying is, if people want it, there should be a minimum 16-hour contract, so that I know that that's what I go home with every week, if at the minimum. And that's why we talk about minimum contracts of 16. It's for those who want it. We get the young students may want only 8 hours because they have a lot of studying to do, but we're talking about majority of our members, and bear in mind we've 20,000 in Northern Ireland, would love more than an 8-hour contract. There's not too many of our members would tell me that they're working 30 hours every week but would love to stay in their 8-hour contract. It's the opposite way around. So this is all on the employers. help. You know, it's all for him, so he can decide to ramp up and ramp down whenever he wants. There's no say from the employee, so our members have no choice. So to give you, for instance, this week alone, I had 3 members phone me on Tuesday saying that their hours were cut down to 8 hours, and they've been working 40 hours the whole pandemic. But all of a sudden this week, they're now back down to 8 hours a week. So for a year, they've been working 40 hours a week. And all of a sudden, now that the pandemic's starting to ease slightly, and keep your fingers crossed that it goes away completely, they're back down to 8 hours. That's what we talk about minimum contracts for people of 16 hours. So hopefully that answers your question, Councillor.
For that there. Alderman Hussey.
Thank you for allowing me in, Chair. I'm not a member of the committee. And I thank each and every one of those who have made presentations. Some very interesting stats throughout that. I'm not sure now, having listened to what Philip has said about whether you have an interest or not, because I'm sure that the students will agree that as parents, we all have a pecuniary interest when you have students at home. In my own case, my eldest son was at Napier. Thankfully, he's through that. My daughter's at John Moores, and my youngest son is at the intention of heading to Bangor, North Wales. So I have to say I will have a pecuniary interest going forward. But with regard to the TUC presentation, and I'm sure the trade unions themselves will agree, there are probably quite a few other unions who are affiliated who could have made presentations that we haven't heard. And then I know this is a city TUC, being one of the most important unions about our area would be the UFU. We aren't hearing from that union, but it is what it is. We've had the presentation on the issues. Couple of questions with regard to meeting people. Have the unions tried to meet with local CBI reps or Chamber of Commerce or indeed Vintners Association? I'll declare an interest there as a vintner in my own area, but a retired teacher. So those employer organisations, that leads through then to the question on 0-hour contracts. And I hear what has been said there. I was going to ask the question that, if it's not 0, what would the minimum be? And the answer is 16. And do people take account of, for example, in my own trade, from New Year through to St. Patrick's Day in a normal year, you'll find very many vintners who just don't have the trade to justify having staff in. And how is that dealt with, or can it be an average over the year that would be suitable on occasion? I just don't know how that question is answered. Ages are there to the 240,000 that has been managed to be brought into the economy. Just a quick one on that. Is that per annum or is that over a period of time? And Sean referred to the invisible staff in school. Well, as I said, I'm a former teacher, and I know that I and quite a few others will never have envisaged or described our ancillary staff as invisible. They're absolutely vital to the running of the school. I always said in the school that I taught in Castleberg, the most important person in that school was the caretaker. And if you wanted to find out anything about the school, it was the caretaker, and the cleaners were able to tell you what you needed to know. So they were never invisible as far as I was concerned. Caroline, you mentioned the issue of COVID vaccination, etc. I wonder how general is that, or will there be specifics where that has been overcome? And I say that because I've said my daughter's at John Moores, but she's home because of COVID and taking lectures online. But she has currently managed to find a teaching practice situation in a local primary school, and that school has been able to ensure that all of their staff, teaching and ancillary, have been able to receive their first vaccination. And because my daughter is there, I urged that she would also receive that cover and has managed to receive that. So I wonder, is there a case with regard to boards of governors or head teachers and the drive that they take that forward on? But I can certainly understand where Caroline's coming from. Teachers in class at whatever stage in the education system, you are in contact with all of those students who you're dealing with, and indeed as are the ladies in the dinner hall or the staff in the office or whatever. Moving on finally, Chair, to the students' presentation. Taking on board all that you've said, as I've said, you know, I've experienced and indeed the experience of the landlords. My wife took my daughter's stuff over to Liverpool, and it's all sitting in a flat in Liverpool, stacked away, but we can't actually get over to use the flat, and it's paid for. You know, so you know, scandalous situation that landlords are placing students in that situation. Although in her first year she was in university accommodation, and they withdrew any fees on that. But as my understanding, that roughly around about 50,000 students in Northern Ireland, but I'm also told there are 60,000 students from Northern Ireland who are studying outside of Northern Ireland. Now, that is an issue that you didn't mention. And I have a particular, I have a particular bone to pick on that one with regard to those Northern Ireland students. You know, our sons and daughters who happen to study outside Northern Ireland, and the Department of the Economy did not make that COVID 500 provision available to them. Have the students' reps any comment on that? Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Alderman Hussey.
You're on mute, Darren.
Darren, you're muted.
Thanks, members. No, there's quite a few questions here, right? So I'm going to go straight on to the answers here now. So, Gareth, you want to come in there first?
Sure. The question as was in reference to the funding of the Union Learn project, which was 240,000 for clarity. That's over the course of the project, which has been running since I believe it was around June of 2016. We began that campaign, and look, the Union Learn project I think is a great example of how well things can work. When there's good collaboration between unions and employers, and when that relationship is one of mutual respect and it does work, then there's benefits for, yes, the members, but also the employer as well. In terms of a happier workforce, is generally a more productive workforce. As I say, through the Union Learn project, that's very much a collaboration between the Department of Economy, the trade unions, and the employers we work with. So any more questions, happy for that, but certainly it's a great success story of what can be done. Thank you.
Gareth, for that. Caroline?
Can you hear me there, Darren?
Yeah, go ahead. Yeah.
This is in response to Alderman Hussey's question regarding the vaccination. There has been what's being referred to by the Department of Education, a health-led process, which were in that case, trusts and consultants, paediatricians have identified a specific amount of children as clinically extremely vulnerable, and some staff have been vaccinated as a result of that process. However, it is a very, very small amount of staff members. I think it comes in at like 25%. Don't quote me on it, but of special school staff, it falls way, way short of what we would be calling for. We would be calling for all staff, and mainstream and special education to be vaccinated. when there's no social distancing, it really is needed. So an answer to his question, his daughter, I'm delighted to hear that she's received the vaccination. Let's hope that the rest of us will be receiving it sooner rather than later. Thank you.
Thank you, Caroline. Niall, there's next there on the list for the questions.
Thanks, Chair. Yeah, just in relation to Alderman Hussey, and I thank him for his presentation. And you know, Alderman Hussey is always at meetings where trade unions are doing presentations. So I thank you for his continued support and engagement. But just in relation to, and I'm sure he'll appreciate that, you know, any body or individual, there has to be a degree of integrity around what you do and your message, and you've got to be consistent. We, you know, in terms of meeting with business leaders and chambers of commerce, and you know, to see what their take is on thing, that will be a question in terms of integrity, because we attended a meeting that was organised by the council before, and the chief executive of the local chambers of commerce at that time was there, and we said that we would be engaging with local restaurants, hotels and cafes to try and highlight the early rates that workers were on, how were they being treated, and following that there would be an assessment carried out around which cafes, which hotels and which restaurants were treated their staff fairly, and staff enjoyed working there. The chief executive of the Chambers of Commerce was totally against that, and he didn't believe that was in the public interest. So in terms of who we meet, we must uphold our integrity. And certainly in terms of the rural communities, I mean, I myself come from a rural community, and the Ulster Farmers Union play a very vital role with farmers, and they are very much a forgotten workforce in many ways, and they're going to be suffering greatly now with the aftermath of Brexit. But many unions, including our own unions, have made donations to rural community groups and various organisations who are based in the rural area. And our remit doesn't just end within the city boundary. We certainly reach beyond that, and we will continue to do. And thank you, Councillor Hussey.
Thank you, Niall. And any one of the student body would like to come in and answer Derek or Alderman Hussey's question?
Yeah, I'm happy to. Yeah, first of all, just to say I'm really sorry, obviously, that you're dealing with a personal circumstance there when it comes to student issues and an empty flat in Liverpool. I know there's thousands of students in that position. It is so disgraceful, it really is. Yeah, I suppose just on your question about students studying elsewhere, particularly in the UK, around not getting that payment being extended to them, we completely support that. I suppose I didn't mention it because we don't technically represent those students, and there's a large number, around 150,000 further education students here who have also been excluded from that. But we absolutely think that students studying elsewhere should get that payment, and it's something that we've included in our petition and our mass email actions. The Minister Dodds continues to say to direct those students to hardship funds within their own universities in different countries, and I just think that's unacceptable. It really doesn't help them or support them in any way, shape or form. And I would also just lastly say on the issue you've raised about so many students from here choosing to study elsewhere, it really highlights that our young people do not want to stay here, and like we have to ask ourselves, with the treatment that they've received over the last year, the last decade, why would they want to? And I think the Minister really needs to do something about that educational migration piece as well. But to answer your question, we absolutely do support that and have been lobbying for those payments to be extended to students studying in England, Wales, Scotland and the South as well.
Thank you, Ellen, for that there. And we'll go on here now to Councillor O'Neill.
Thank you, Chair, and thank you for the excellent presentations from everyone today. I really enjoyed listening and hearing everybody's experiences there. I just want to say it was really great to hear the voices of local workers and students, but also the demands that people are bringing forward for the change that we need to see beyond COVID, beyond this pandemic. Because I think it's important to acknowledge that the world that we lived in before the pandemic hit was not normal. It wasn't working for the majority of people in society. And I think it's so important that we have fighting unions and fighting student unions in order to call for and to shape the change that we need to see in this world. So it was really good to hear some of those demands coming through today. And I think that all the issues that were raised are so important. And I look forward to hearing more from these unions and from other unions and student unions. Like in terms of what Councillor Harkin said around education support workers feeling or being invisible, I think what he meant was that they felt like they're invisible to decision makers and to the executive, who are determining their wages and their terms and conditions. And I felt Saoirse made a really important point on pregnancy rights for workers. And I know I'm not part of this committee, but I feel that this is an important health issue. And just to suggest a potential proposal on the safety of pregnant workers throughout their pregnancy, I can put that in the chat box. But thanks again, and thanks, Chair, for letting me know.
Councillor O'Neill, I'll just go into Councillor Duffy, right?
Thank you, Chair, as well, for allowing me in, and thank you to all the speakers. Tremendous presentations throughout, really informative and really enlightening in terms of the many issues that present workers right across all the different sectors. So it actually, I was worried that it would have been a wee bit too much, but it actually was very good. And I think the time slot, she's got so much into it. So thank yous for that information. I think probably I just want to start on this point. The point has been made around the First Minister, Arlene Foster, refusing to meet with the unions. I would just like to say the joint First Minister, Michelle O'Neill, has met with unions many times and will continue to do so. But just in terms of the trade unionists, I am a member of Unison myself and have been for many years, and NUPSA before that. So in terms of this year, if we're talking about this year and COVID and all the rest of it, it really became the year of the frontline worker, where it was the recognition of the work of frontline workers was to the fore, and everyone was singing frontline workers' praises. Unfortunately, it hasn't transpired into anything more substantial to the workers than praise at this point, but I do hope that it will continue, and we need to keep that fight up there and keep that recognition up there in terms of, to see if it hadn't been for the windman, see if it hadn't been for the nurse, see if it hadn't been for the shop worker, well then we would all been in huge trouble over the last year. So we need to keep that to the front of everybody's mind going forward. Saoirse or Niall, whoever in terms wants to take this. I am a member of Unison Community and Voluntary Branch, and I work in the homeless sector. And even today, in terms of the homeless sector, what we were doing was getting homeless people to a centre for vaccination, because they are a very vulnerable population. So that's some of the type of work that we're involved in, and Niall, you especially would know that. But I suppose you talked, I think it was Saoirse, in your presentation around some organisations still not recognising the union in terms of a negotiating body. Do you see, in terms of that, can I ask a question? I'm not obviously asking for who they are, but would there be many within the city and district that still don't recognise the work of the union and the right of the employee to be part of a union in terms of negotiation? Because I would be interested in that, and I think that is something that, if it's still happening, we should be taking to the department around the awarding of contracts around it, because workers' rights should be to the fore as well in terms of the awarding of contracts. And I think I've had this conversation with you before now. Let me see. I'll move on then. Just, you see, in terms of the students and the Students Deserve Better campaign, absolutely. And I will also declare a pecuniary interest in it, as I have a daughter, don't know, Summer in here, who has a flat lying empty in Belfast as well. Student to Queen's, final year student. our accommodation last year lay empty for half the year, and our accommodation this year is lying empty for the majority of the year as well. Paying fees, doing online classes, it's crap. It is basically what it is. So completely support the Students Deserve Better campaign, and have attended a couple of Zooms that you've done as well. So well done to you all on the campaign, because you aren't a single group with a single identity. There is so many different issues on it. So I just want to congratulate you on the campaign. There were lots of asks throughout the whole presentation. Do you see if those asks, if individual union reps want to email them through as well? And I know Councillor Harkin has a proposal there, but I don't think he encompassed all the asks. So if they could maybe email through some of the stuff that was missed, because it's really important stuff and it should be given proper consideration by ourselves and the chamber.
Councillor Duffy, could I just ask you to bring your
yes,
remarks to a
indeed. And I
close?
just want to comment then on the shop workers really quickly. Really interesting, because I had somebody in the same situation, worked throughout the pandemic full-time hours, and then as soon as shielders started to come back to work, they were dropped back down to a 0-hour contract and getting basically 4 or 8 hours a week. So it's disgraceful behaviour on the part of some. So, but thank you for the presentation. Really enjoyed it. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Duffy. Can I ask Councillor O'Neill, is that a proposal you have in the box? Because we still have Councillor Harkins to deal with, which I was going to leave to the question and answers.
I can't make a proposal, Darren. It was just a suggestion. I'm not part of this committee.
No, if you maybe if you would even want to keep that for full council, it's a good enough motion there when I'm looking at it now. But I'll take the answers now. So, or no, you know what I'll do? I'll take Councillor Durkin first, and then we'll take a few questions and answers again.
Darren, thanks for letting me in, and
Yeah.
I'll be brief. I'm not on this committee, but I was keen to get here today, and I'm really glad I did, and I'm happy to speak on behalf of the party here and just thank everyone for their presentations and thank the trade unions for all their work. And it is really true, now is the time of the union. Strength through unity is more important than ever, and it was good to hear all the individual sectors and the specific demands and specific campaigns. And the Students Deserve Better campaign, again, as we've backed a number of trade union motions, we've backed student unions too. And just to commend the excellent leadership and wish Ellen well. I know she's got another year in her term, and a brilliant team there with Ryan and Bethany and others. And we'll continue to support as a council. And I think we can be proud as a council for our work with unions, and hopefully we do more of this, and look forward to the Workers' Rights and Social Justice Week coming up very soon. In terms of the proposal, Sean has put in the chat box with the respective campaigns, the USDA, the RCN, the Unison for the vaccines for the education workers, and the FE demands. They're all very current live campaigns, and yeah, we're happy to support those campaigns. Sandra did refer to the fact there might be other asks that I'm not sure. Rory's off now for the NIPSA, and he mentioned the fact that we're still not resolved the pay rise there. So there might be others too, but we're happy to support these various demands, and thank you very much, and look forward to further conversations offline too. So thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Durkin. A few questions there. If you'd like to come in now, and I'm sorry because I was just distracted, so I didn't get who all Councillor O'Neill was actually questioning. But if they know who they are, if they could maybe come in there.
Sorry, Chair's response to Councillor Duffy's question.
Yes. Go ahead there.
Thank you, Councillor Duffy, for the question regarding recognition agreements. Unison Community Involvement Branch across the region, we have over 300 employers in our branch, and we have 7 recognition agreements. Most of the community and voluntary employers are very anti-trade union. They will not recognise trade unions no matter how many times that we approach them regarding the recognition, and state that this is what their staff want, and that we are the union that they want to represent them. It does cause difficulty for the members because the organisations will only allow the member to have trade union representation for statutory meetings such as grievances and disciplinaries. They will not allow representation at investigatory meetings or anything else. Where we do have recognition, our members have better terms and conditions and have better rates of pay. Within the last year, 3 of the employers that we have recognition with, the workers got pay rises, and that was through the hard work and negotiation of the reps on the ground. But it's worrying how employers can get away with refusing to recognise trade unions, and it needs to change, and there needs to be legislation brought in to stop the anti-trade union laws that are affecting so many of our members and workers across different unions as well. Thank you.
Saoirse. Nobody else coming in there. So, Councillor Harkin, you'd asked to come back in there.
Yeah, well, like it was on two of the points that have been raised, which I think are absolutely crucial, because there's a bit of a discussion there about zero-hour contracts. And look, our council area, as people will know, has voted. It's our corporate position to call for an end to zero-hour contracts across the district. It's also included that the Stormont government will end zero-hour contracts. That's in the new the new Stormont agreement that brought the government back. I'm forgetting what the name of it is right now. New decade, new agreement, or it's in there that zero-hour contracts will be no more. And I think that that's very important. And of course, there is also always going to be situations where people need to work a smaller number of hours. But I think that those are the things that you can have a bit of flexibility on when there's actually an established platform. And right now, we don't have an established platform. And there are unfortunately some employers who are taking advantage of that. I've heard stories from Kieran and others about young workers earning less than £5 an hour, and there's situations like that where there's just unfair pay that needs to be, and too many taking advantage of it. I mean, look, what Councillor Duffy raised, I think, is very important. There is, not just in the community and voluntary sector, but right across the district, there's plenty of employers, big and small, who are very, very resistant to trade unions. And look, trade unions don't do everything, but we are in a situation where we have out of control inequality and a lack of people having a voice in their workplace during very dangerous times. And trade unions have historically been a way for people collectively to try and address those issues. So unfortunately there's a lot of resistance to trade unions, even though when you hear people talking today, it's common sense. It should be common sense that people should join a union and have a right to a voice at work. I mean, this is very, very basic. People go to work afraid, and they go to work afraid to speak out, and they know if you speak out in some places, you will be shunned and may lose your job. And people have mortgages, and they have student tuition on the line, and that's what a union can do. It gives you that protection, and it gives you the right. So just in terms of, I think a lot of workers feel that they've been invisible, that people, how can we explain why people who do such essential work haven't had a wage increase for decades, other than they're invisible or they're unimportant? So I would put it back to Caroline or anybody else. Workers have become more visible over the last year, but because a lot of us have been at home, and we've relied on people who've been willing to go out and work while there's been a pandemic. So I think that's the issue about. I totally get what Councillor Hussey was saying, that they weren't visible to him in his workplace, and that's crucial. I think most teachers would say that. But I think, unfortunately, when you look at people's terms and conditions, many people do feel that they are at least invisible, because there's not enough outrage and uproar about what they're. I mean, look, we have workers in our city, nurses, going to food banks. How is that possible? I mean, that is where we are. We've had a massive increase in people going to food banks right across this district. This is, as we've seen, there is plenty of money. It's about political priorities for people who are decision makers about where that money is going to be spent. So, I think this has been one of the most enlightening discussions I've been at in a while. I know there was a lot of information, but this should be stuff that people just know and shouldn't have to come to a council meeting like this to find out. And the problem is that's because the voice of people who are doing the work in our society and people who aren't able to work for one reason or another right now isn't being, I don't think it's being heard loud enough. And I think the unions can be louder on it. And I think that, making sure workers in our district, and there's many more who could have been here, have a platform is the way that we actually put a spotlight and champion all these demands. So again, look, I've spoken too much. I want to thank everybody and the students. The students, I think, have had an exemplary campaign over the last year, because the treatment of students has been horrendous. And what they did is they organised a loud campaign that put demands to the executive, and they haven't won everything, but they've won some things, and now they're campaigning for more for students. And I think that is, we have to commend their work, and unfortunately our council's backed a number of their demands, and that's it's great to see them here today as well. Sorry, Darren. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Harkin. Councillor Donnelly.
Thanks for letting me in, Chair. I'm not a member of the committee, but first of all, Chair, I'd like to pay tribute to yourself here today. This meeting, as Councillor Harkins pointed out, this to me is a very, very good meeting. A lot of meetings that we would have in council, they're very limited, and you don't get through, having proper discussions. And sometimes it can come across as like a box ticking exercise. But I have to say it's very in depth today. A lot of the points, have already been covered in all our questions and comments by members. But I would like to thank the trade union members and the student union members here today. Coming out of this pandemic, there's a lot of work to be done. I think, that a lot of people have used the pandemic. They have an attack on students. They have attacks on workers. And time again, the great and the good will praise the workers, and will stand at the doors and clap for, when it comes down to the nitty gritty, then they get a slap in the teeth. We talk about the students, the young people, and how important they are, and then we look at the brain drain when the best, the best of people with the best abilities are being forced to emigrate and leave the country. So again, I'd just like to pay tribute to the contributors there, and that coming out of this, I think there's a lot of work to be done. But thanks for the presentation. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Donnelly. And Councillor O'Neill.
Thank you, Chair. I'm just going to ask a question just briefly because I've already spoken. Thank you for letting me on again. It's just to Saoirse. I know the Council voted to support the Unison Community and Voluntary Sector Branches campaign to be included in the £500 recognition payment. Can you give us an update on that campaign, Saoirse?
Thank you for the question, Maeve. As you are all aware, that the Unison Community and Voluntary Branch have launched the £500 COVID recognition payment for workers in our sector. Our members have been in contact with politicians right across the region. Some have received positive feedback, some of the feedback hasn't been as positive, but it is now up to the Department for Communities to recognise the dedication of the essential frontline workers within our sector. The workers that I'm talking about within the Strabane district, We'll be working on House in the Wells, Bonds Hill Hostel, Shepherd's View Young Parents Project and Beachway Learning Disability Scheme, to name just a few. But we will continue with our campaign to ensure that there's recognition out there for the workers within the sector, because we are vital, and without the hard work and dedication of the members of our branch, I don't think people would have been able to cope through the last year with the pandemic. Thank you.
Thank you, Saoirse, for that there. That's all the indicated speakers I have. So I'm just going to just add a bit to it now. I thank everybody from the trade union members and the student unions as well for coming here today to present to the members of council. It was very informative. I do support 10-hour minimum wage, £10 an hour minimum wage. I see both sides of the argument for the ban on zero hours contract, and I see that because my family, a family member, my daughter, as a student, has taken part in a 0 hour contract. Now I have to say the company has been very good to their staff. She even received furlough last year when it was closed down. So I do see the pros and cons for it. I do agree in proper sick pay, and I do believe that Stormont, the Northern Ireland Assembly, got it wrong in this, because in England the scheme was introduced so that anyone who was shielding, or sorry, anyone who had to take time off their work through self-isolation, there was a £500 for the 14 days issued to that person, so that they could take off work and have no monetary worries about not getting paid or anything like that. That wasn't offered here in Northern Ireland, and that was a big mistake. You had people who went into work knowing that they had contracted COVID, and they still went into work because they couldn't afford to take off. You know, that's wrong. What Andrew says, and I know he's left here now, through the trauma experienced by healthcare staff during this pandemic must be taken into account, and proper mental health care offered to all the staff, as well as students from all ages who have really taken a hit in the past year, both financially and through their mental health as well. And I think that's important that everybody remembers that. I do support the 12.5% for NHS staff, and I do support everything else that everyone, their campaigns that all they're working for. I myself was never been a member of a union, although I do believe in the work they carry out on behalf of workers everywhere. And I did experience working in, and I'll mention it was Seagate and Limavady, and I remember the unions trying to get in, and they were refused at the gateway by people. People were taking the leaflets in one hand and throwing them out in the other. And whenever it came to the final days of Seagate, those people were crying for unions to come in and help them. I'm shocked that the First Minister would not speak to trade unions, as no one should be afraid of discussions to achieve better working conditions for all. And I'll end it there on that note, and thank all the members of the trade unions and the student unions for coming in and presenting today. It's been very much appreciated by the members. Thank you. Now, if you want to stay on, that's fair enough. It's okay. We're just going to discuss Councillor Harkin's proposal, which is on the chat box now. So if anybody wants to come in and speak on Councillor Harkin's proposal, and I will agree that Councillor Harkin, taxi drivers do need a union, although I'll not get involved in that one, as I will have to leave the meeting. Sorry, before we start discussing this, Councillor Ferguson has informed me that she needs to be put in the room as her partner works in Northwest Regional College. So if we could put Councillor Ferguson and the lobby. Okay. I'm just going back here, folks. Bear with me a minute. There's a lot of chat came in there at the last minute, so Councillor Mooney is first there.
Yes, Chair. Thank you for letting me on. I tried to get in there, but I had problems with my Wi-Fi here, so just to try and make a comment. But no, I think Councillor Durgan's left, and obviously Mary's not a member of the committee, but she spoke for us anyway because, and obviously she's left now, so we will be supporting the proposal anyway, and obviously the asks in the proposal are what were given by the speakers. Can I just, for the record, too, just commend the speakers from the unions and from the student union bodies, and the format that was presented here today. The 3 minutes presentations were really good and really useful. It broke down very coherently and cogently the submissions that everybody wanted to make, and it was a really good format. And it would be great to see it sort of used, I guess, maybe for further on, if it was possible, and if it fitted the sort of format that these presentations will be in the future. But we'll be in support of the proposal, and thank you, Chair.
Councillor Mooney, I have no happy to support from Councillor Duffy, and second, as you seconded it there, Sandra, okay. And Councillor Harkin, you want to come back in there?
Yeah, thank you, Chair. 1 second. Yeah, look, that's great to hear that councillors are going to back the proposals that we heard coming from the presenters today. And obviously, we didn't get everything, but we've also we've also actually supported quite a few motions through the council already in support of student demands. There's probably other ones we can add, and if students want to get in touch after today, we can certainly follow up on that and bring it to further meetings. And if there are, what I wanted to do is hopefully everybody will be okay adding the proposal that Saoirse brought regarding pregnant workers. I think that is a straightforward one. And if it's all right, we would add that to the proposal list there. I think that if there's any obvious things that we should have in there that was raised today, people could maybe bring them in and add on to it. And look, we will get to ratify this at the full council meeting. And if people can, if there are things they amend it with, I'm sure we can do it there as well. But I wanted to encourage everybody, hopefully, to support the series of proposals, and they're very much in line with our workers' rights and social justice corporate positions, and to add in the proposal from the Unison Community Branch to support pregnant women. Thank you. Pregnant workers. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Harkin. Do you want to add? Yep, that's being added there at the bottom. I think everyone's unanimous about this anyway, so I don't think we need to vote.
Chair, I'm happy to support and second the entire proposal.
Okay.
I don't feel the need to speak on it. It's fine.
Thank you, Councillor Duffy. Thank you. Folks, I have no other indicated speakers, so I'm going to bring the meeting to an end. The proposal has been accepted. Thank all the speakers that presented today. I apologise that they could only get around the 3 minutes. I did give a wee bit extra as it was going along because a few notified us that they couldn't make it. However, thank you for everyone for doing it. And I'd just like to finish off by saying that I wish all the speakers, the officers and members a happy, but most of all safe Easter. We all must be mindful that COVID is still a threat, and we must continue to follow guidelines and hope that we all see brighter days ahead. So happy Easter, everyone, and stay safe. Thank you. Bye, everyone.
Thanks, Chair. Happy Easter.
Thank you.
Thanks, Chair. Happy Easter, everyone. All the best.
Thank you.